Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Detroit-based jazz pianist and composer Sven Anderson. He has a new project out now. It's the 2021 CD Doc's Holiday. Over the years, he has been privileged to play a small role in linking the great musical tradition that runs through the city of Detroit with new directions in music by working with masters like Jimmy Scott, Marcus Belgrave, and so many others. He's got a deep and rich story. Enjoy.
Hey, thank you for taking a minute out to the show. I appreciate it.
Oh, no, thank you. This is awesome. And I subscribe to your show. I wasn't really aware of it until Chris, sent it to me. So I subscribed, and I've been checking it out. It's really great. I think you're a great interviewer.
Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate that. Yeah.
And it's great that I just really appreciate that you're doing this, because, we all need this,
Oh, my God. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's like jazz is like the hidden secret of the world,
Mm-hmm.
So it needs to get out there. But your latest album, Doc's Holiday, is, it's coming out during a time where, live music is starting up, the world's waking up a little bit. How refreshing and relieving is it to have new music out right now?
I think it's great. I think it's also an indication of what, society as a whole is really needed, and it's what blows me away is seeing these young people that just play. I was on Facebook yesterday, and I see this young kid playing just this thing, sounding like Jocko on the bass, and then he starts doing two-handed stuff. I mean, double octave solos on this keyboard that he twisted, and I can't remember the kid's name. And then he pulls out a guitar and starts playing that. He was burning on everything, and he looked like he was about 12 years old. I just think it's fantastic. This is like my first project that I've done that was just completely original. My wife's a vocalist, and all the recordings that I've done, I've always been as a sideman, but with her, it's always much her in front, and I'm the musical director for those recordings, and so this is. I just thought, because I've written a lot. My training is as a composer, and so I thought, I really should. It seems like I've been avoiding this my whole life, and I should just do this, and so that's really what that's about. And I decided I wasn't going to call it Doc's Holiday. At first, I was going to call it Friends after the title, because each tune is pretty much, I don't know, there's one I dedicate to Airto and Chick Corea and McCoy Tyner, so I look at, even though I've met Airto, I haven't met all of them, but I kind of feel like I've known them, they're living with their music, and like when I practice, I use sequence patterns of Airto's drum patterns and things like that. So I kind of feel like they're my friends. Like years ago when my father was alive, he showed me that, I was sitting there looking at the library that he had, his bookshelves, and he just says to me, he looks at these books like they're his friends, because he had volumes and volumes of all these, different authors. And so that's how I feel like with recordings and different musicians that I haven't ever had the opportunity to meet, but you do kind of on some level, if it's spiritual, if you want to say, because of the music.
So I'm curious, you're from Detroit. Are you originally from Detroit?
No, actually. See, I mentioned my father. He was a Presbyterian pastor. He wound up in Detroit because he had been associate pastor. We were in Ohio before that, but I'm originally from California. I was born in Richmond, or actually San Rafael, outside of Richmond, which is a suburb of San Francisco. And but we moved away from there when I was 8, and moved to Ohio for a couple of years, and then came to Detroit because he got this pastorship where he was the head pastor, because he had been an associate pastor, which only, allows him to sermonize once a month and whatnot, and he had to do all these other duties. But he got a pastorship at an inner city church, so it was a predominantly black church. I don't know, that's been a huge influence on me growing up in the city of Detroit, like especially artists like Stevie Wonder, Motown, and I've been really fortunate to have had an association with quite a few of the Motown musicians that worked in the Snake Pit and whatnot. I used to actually, I'm a retired choral accompanist. My jazz mentor, jazz piano, was Charles Bowles, and he's still alive. He's pretty close to, let's see, how old is he now? He's almost 90, and but he's pretty much retired from playing. And he was Aretha Franklin's pianist back in. He was probably her first pianist. I got my bachelor's here at Oakland University, where my teacher was Doc Holliday, named Marvin Doc Holliday, who named the alma mater. Got my master's degree in Cleveland, and when I came back, I just got kind of disillusioned with. I was going down the path of being a contemporary classical composer. My degrees are in composition, and I just kind of got disillusioned with the academic atmosphere. And just feeling. I just kind of turned off. I thought, I'm going back to Detroit. I'm going to get back with my jazz teacher that I had, here, and that's how he's the reason I became a choral accompanist, because he was doing it for the board at Detroit Board of Ed, and the system, the Detroit public school system, I believe is the only one in the country that had a full-time position for piano player as an accompanist. They had dance accompanists and they had choral accompanists. Well, so I got the choral accompanying job, and I did that. I retired from that 3 years ago. The thing about that was that and a lot of jazz musicians actually in the city would do that. The dance accompanist at the school I was assigned to was Earl Van Dyke, who was the musical director in the Snake Pit for Motown, and he was also Stevie Wonder's teacher, because Stevie Wonder was like a kid hanging out. He said you couldn't get him off of any instrument. He'd sit down and play it. So it's been a pretty rich heritage, and I've been really fortunate to be able to rub elbows with guys like that, and unfortunately, so many of them have moved on, made their transition, and like for instance, the song that Marvin Gaye, I don't know if you're familiar with Larry Nazzaro, but he passed, about, I don't know, a little over a decade ago. He's the saxophonist that did the solo on What's Going On, at the opening of that tune, the Marvin Gaye tune. And I was working with him for the last few years of his life. I was his main piano player, and he passed on. And Johnny Trudell, he just passed this year. Johnny Trudell is the trumpet player in the Snake Pit, and he used to be one of the main contractors for like shows and stuff in the area. So he used to employ me a lot. Used to get, Larry would call me for a lot of stuff. Earl Van Dyke used to refer me to. So it's kind of I don't know. It's been hard because guys that you to try to make it strictly as a working musician, to make it in the jazz world. So everything I pretty much counted on guys like Larry and Johnny to call me up, because I would, if you get a show, you're working steadily, for the run of the show. But anyway, so you gotta do what you can do. So when this job came up that my teacher, this was in the 80s, late 80s, and he told me about it. He said, you should do this. Then you don't have to worry about your bills pretty much, because it pays your bills. But you really don't save a lot, because you're not really an instructional. It was a job that paid more than a sub, but not quite as much as the teacher. So you try to still do gigs later on and during the after school. And so it's a busy, very stressful too. So that's one reason why I retired early, because I just couldn't take the grind of going down. I was working at Cass Tech, which is a school that Donald Byrd graduated from. It was really a what they call a baccalaureate, like a college prep type school, and it was also one historically that back in the dark ages would allow black students to attend it. So it's had a nice, a good tradition. But they also cranked out, I think Ron Carter went there. I mentioned Donald Byrd, but you also had people like Louis Tomlin. But there was an older drummer that's still alive named Bob Pencherstedt, was in the same B band with Donald Byrd, and he used to joke about it. Donald Byrd was in B band because it was so. Now during the pandemic, there's been, pretty much I've only done like I think about 3 or 4 gigs. And I hadn't done, my wife wouldn't let me do anything. And we were also not sure about, we were kind of, I don't want to call ourselves anti-vaxxers. We were just kind of hesitant about doing it because of, it's new and people like my sister who's a nurse, and she was hesitant about it because of the testing and not sharing what, Anyway, we finally broke down and did get it vaccinated. So I felt fairly secure about going out and jobbing, but still there's not that much available right now. I did actually this group on this current CD was supposed to open up last year at the Jazz Festival here in Detroit, and at the beforehand I talked to Chris, the guy who runs it. They wouldn't be able to social distance, because I've got the 3 horns, and my wife's just, singing, and with all the people on stage, they couldn't guarantee that we would actually be far enough, so we were afraid, and anyway, he was cool about it. We backed out because we hadn't been vaccinated yet, and also the bass player that was on that recording, who was going to be on the show, had come down with COVID, so beforehand, but he was okay at the point, and everybody was ready to go do it, but I pulled the plug because I just didn't feel like if somebody came down with COVID because of that. I mean, I just didn't want to, I'd feel responsible. And actually, I got to mention that a good friend of my wife's and mine, and he's a great musician, vibraphonist, probably one of the greatest vibraphonists that alive. He's in the hospital, serious, with double pneumonia, and he's been on a respirator. His name's Rob Pfirrman, and so it's things like that going on. It's you feel like, wow, is it? Yeah, it's music, and it's my, our life, blood, and is it that important to put your life or anybody else's life at risk? So it's kind of tough. It's been a tough way to go at this time, and of course that, and it's because we're all getting sick of hearing about it, talking about it, and dealing with it. But what are you going to do? This is what we're faced with at the moment. My wife and I, because so that was one good thing about it, though, is that there's all this stuff going on the internet, because it's kind of the avenue that's been left over for the open for the rest of us, and it's been open all along. It's just I've never been a tech person, so I've been kind of shying away from all that for years, and I was also one of the holdouts with. I don't know if you're old enough to remember the whole issue with people going electric as opposed to staying acoustic, and the selling out if you went electric and all that kind of a thing. I mean, that goes back to the the funk days and whatnot, and I was a holdout because I was, I don't know, enamored with McCoy Tyner, and you can't really play the way McCoy does on a Fender Rhodes. It sounds terrible, and so I just was never excited. And anytime I was in a gig where I had to use an electric, you just don't get that same response that you get from a real instrument. An acoustic instrument. And so I've always, I don't know, been kind of could sound tentative, or because you hit that key and it's amplified, it's a different instrument. It's like playing electric guitar as opposed to acoustic guitar. I'm learning more about it. So I guess I'm saying that because I feel like I'm diving off the deep end, trying to get the tech together. I've been working with the Logic program, and it's really, I love it, but there's just so much to know, and how to, to hold it. It's like nowadays everybody has to wear all these hats. They'd be especially now if you're doing the tech, you got to be an engineer, you got to, all those things. And I think if I had to do my recording over this Doc's Holiday all over again, I would have, help, because I had to do all the hats. I had to do the production. I did do it in a professional studio, but it would have been nice to have somebody, actually sit in the studio that was producing and how all that goes. And let me ask you this: I'm curious about, are you a musician too, or how did you come about to do the your podcast, your radio show? I mean, was that something that, in addition to your own playing, or you just?
No, I played the drums a little bit. I have some really good friends in my 20s that almost made it really, really big. They were a pop band, and one of the guys in the band was one of my best friends, and he introduced me to Kind of Blue on a trip to Seattle. And then after that, we were roommates, and he had every CD under the sun, and I just got enamored with it. And I was then broadcasting at the time. I was a sports broadcaster when I was in college, and I kind of got on the inside. I'm like, I don't know if I really want to do this. I'm not really feeling like, covering these sports with these athletes, and I just don't really want to do it, so I bowed out. And years later, I ran into a radio show here in Kansas City called The Neon Beat with a guy by the name of John Christopher, and he was doing the American Songbook. So I reached out and said, man, I love your show. And it just so happened he was literally 5 blocks away from me. He was an engineer by day and got all this equipment over the years from radio stations they were going to get rid of, and constructed a studio in his garage. He said, write a script and come over to my house. In 2011, I walked in, I picked jazz, I just felt right, and ever since then I've been doing it. So
that's great.
Yeah.
So you are a musician, and it's funny because drummers, I feel like for myself, I've gotten more out of drummers, just personally, as far as for my writing and playing, and like I got Steve Gadd's book, I got the Duke of Fonseca's book, and Airto's book, and researching all those rhythms, and being a composer, I see all these patterns and everything, and so I really relied on the drummers to really for even just practicing. I got to meet Airto here at one of the festivals, and I told him, I said, I practice your music every day, because as opposed to back in the day, you had to use a metronome to practice with, having a sequencer, and if I learned enough to be able to program patterns in it, you put those patterns in it, it locks you in. You hear what it's so. That's one of the ways actually the main way besides listening to the recordings and things like that and playing with other people, but as far as working on your own, practice time, that's what I would do. And as a lot of the Afro-Cuban books and stuff, they suggest that you do that, because when you hear the patterns locked in and whatnot, anyway, it helps. And now with the DAWs like the Logic that I use, I do it now on Logic. I just wish I knew more. I used to record concerts at Institute of Music in Cleveland for my work study. So I got the basic analog concept together, but I never really studied it. So when it comes to algorithms and all this, I don't know any of that technical stuff. I just knew how to zero up the meters and get a good level, and you push the button, stop it when it's done. It doesn't take a whole lot to understand when it comes to that. But I do want to mention, so my wife and I have a new website that we're still modifying, but an old friend of mine that was in school, both here in Detroit and in Cleveland. I kind of lost touch with him 30 years, but he's got his own studio out on the West Coast, and we kind of got back together because, well, I should back up here. Past couple recordings that my wife and I did, we had an engineer that helped us kind of co-produce the recordings. His name was Steve King, and he worked at I forget the name of the studio over here, but he was the engineer on 8 Mile for Eminem, but he we knew him before he started doing all that stuff, and the word was he didn't want to. He was too busy. But out of the blue, my wife called him up and said, "Hey, if you feel like doing something different, we could use your help on our recording." And so, long story short, he passed away 7 years ago, and my wife had this project, and I said, "Hey, why don't we call Tom and see, because he's got a studio out there." And I didn't realize 30 years had gone by, and I had only talked to him a handful of times over that amount of time. And now we're talking to each other almost every day. Anyway, he's helping us out as far as, we didn't understand when we had our website, how things work on the internet. And I'm sure you know about all this. You want to have one pretty much hub or whatever you want to call it, that everybody, all they have to do is type in Janet and Sven, and it calls everything up that you have on the internet pretty much. He knows how to do all that stuff, so he's helping us with that. And one of the things that we're going to launch is a blog called The Gig Chronicles, and we're asking people to, and we've been amassing these stories that people have that occurred on gigs or with various musicians. Like for instance, I went to Jazz in July in the 80s, which is, I don't know if you're familiar with it. It was Billy Taylor's thing when he was alive. He'd have for a week or two these clinics in Amherst. And so the year that I went there, I got to meet Max Roach, right? And so there's all these stories with him. Like I went up to him and introduced myself, and I said, "Hey, could I get your autograph?" And he said, "What do you want my autograph for?" I go, "Are you kidding me? You're Max Roach." And then he had this huge smile, and from that point on, it was like he took me under his wing. And so throughout the clinic, I asked him, I said, "Can I skip my classes and go to yours?" Because this was Max Roach, So I just wanted to, anyway, there's stories about that, and I won't say anything more about it, because with this blog, we're going to release a lot of these stories. R.J. Spangler, who's a drummer here in town, worked with a lot of these, some blues singers and whatnot, but he's part of an organization, I can't remember the name of it, that it's a jazz organization that but he's got a ton of stories that my wife is mostly the one that's been getting all that together. There's another guy, Keith Illich Loving, he was a guitar player. He's retired now, living in New Jersey, but he was used to work with Harry Belafonte and Barry Manilow and Gregory Hines, which I had no idea. Gregory Hines had a touring band, and Keith played guitar in that, and I had no idea that Gregory Hines was a guitar player. So there's a bunch of stories there. And the reason we're doing this is so that it for a community thing to, there's all these stories. Well, and actually, when I was at the Billy Taylor workshop, that's one of the things he mentioned, that every city has, these musicians that no one will ever know about, that, are like the torchbearers or whatever in their communities and keeping things going and keeping things alive. But there's historically, we're losing so much, by these stories not, they're dying with these people, and like, Johnny Trudell's gone and Larry Nazaro's gone. And I just kind of wish I would have spent more time picking their brains about history, because Larry used to tour with Sergio Mendes, and he told me stories about that, and I did some musical direction for Little Jimmy Scott, and I got a bunch of stories there, so we're just going to try to, it's mainly, I think the thing I wanted to tell you is that to me, it's not so much about, it'd be nice, I want people to like what I'm doing, and I want people to find out who I am. But I need to document the things, that just keep moving along. I can't worry about, how successful it is. That's not the point. I feel like I'm happier than I ever been because I'm actually finally doing all the stuff that I really wanted to do with my life. When I did the accompanying gig for all those decades, that's not what I went to school for, but I learned in when I was in Cleveland, working on my master's, I taught for the music school settlement there at the same time. If you're not willing to, look, you were a drummer and you kind of followed your impulse to, you modified what it was, whatever got you to be a musician, to the spark. Well, if I'm going to, you got to do what works, right? What you got to be willing, you got to be flexible. And that's my gigs I've always had separate, like I played in a lot of churches. I counted on, so it's coming up in Detroit, my dad was a minister at a black church. I counted on, getting church gigs, and it seems like it can be very, a stressful life, because you're constantly moving and running, and it's hard if there's you're not taking care of your health, because you're working so hard. You won't last that long. And so I had to let this job go at the board, playing in it was high school, and they did actually the Cass Tech was a great. It's a great school. The students were great. I love them like my own kids. It's just that having to drive where I live is on one side of town, and having to drive every morning or through rush hour, white knuckling it to get there, and then you go through all this. And they can be the greatest kids actually in the high school, the greatest kids. But there's that adolescent energy that is so intense. It doesn't matter how good they are, it still can be very stressful. And always in the back of my mind too, it's like, man, I wish I could be home practicing, or the main thing right now, we my buddy on the West Coast told me we should, boil down. We used to go by, the website used to be Sven and Janet Jazz. And he said, no, take the jazz off, just make it Janet and Sven. And so the YouTube channel that I have, we're in the process of changing that also. It's all Janet and Sven. So all you got to do is type that in, and then all that stuff comes up. And like I said, I'm not a tech person, so I I really don't know what I'm talking about half the time with that stuff. I'm just kind of regurgitating what I've heard him say, but eventually I'll get to that. This iPhone, I tried to take a movie on it while I was practicing playing, because one of my, the people on the internet, they want to see you doing things. I mean, that's what all the stuff I've been studying and reading about. They want to see what you're doing. It's like you get more hits or whatever when people see that hey, look, I'm buying a hamburger over here, or whatever. They want to see that's what they're interested in. So I haven't really posted a whole lot of videos of myself doing anything. I think just a few months ago I posted the first time I took my laptop and filmed me playing a song that I dedicated to my teacher on Facebook. And it's the only thing I posted, and I posted the score to this song I wrote. And I just haven't gotten to that place yet where I can just fire up, the camera or whatever and go, poof, just do it. I will. I'll get there eventually when I get the tech together and understand how these things work. My wife is getting on me because this phone I'm talking on needs to be backed up, and there's a situation with, and this is the thing with Apple, at least as in my experience, and it's always screwed me up with the tech, is the Apple ID. When they say you should change it or whatever, you need this, put your Apple ID in, and I could never, I have a hard time remembering half the time. And so when you start changing IDs, it's getting better because they talk about the smart devices and whatnot. I've always been kind of paranoid about smart devices, with the iCloud, what my wife encountered. I don't really use it at all right now, but the thing about deleting something automatically deletes it on iCloud, or when you delete it, I forget how it works. You delete it on iCloud, it deletes it on all your devices. So that kind of freaks me out because, I've got all this music, on my hard drive, my original music, and I just, it's kind of scary, I come from the day, when I was recording concerts, we recorded on tape, and I have to edit with using the razor blade and everything, and that was always scary to people when they see the razor blade come out, and it's a lot. People don't understand. I think now they're coming up now. It's like, oh, you got to push a button here and do all this other stuff, and it seems a lot easier. But they didn't have to go through all that. If you make a mistake when you're cutting the tape, that's it.
Man, I think you covered pretty much everything I was going to ask, I think, in that one answer. But I did want to ask you one final question, and I want to know. Everyone has a perception of you, your family, your friends, your fans. But you ultimately live your life. Who do you think you are?
Well, that's a deep question, man. And I'll probably go on forever with the answer because I don't know, man. You got me. I'm a musician, and it really. I'm also my wife and I have been doing Tai Chi for about 30 years. We're what you call, we're disciples in the Wu family. And it sounds kind of culty or whatever when you say disciple, but they don't mean it that way. The Chinese family, it just means what it says, a disciple, it's a discipline, right? It just means that you've attained this level of discipline, and it's not really a religious thing, whereas I think because you got Jesus and the 12 apostles, the 12 disciples, people automatically start thinking, oh, you're worshiping this or that. No, it doesn't. I mean, but I don't know. I guess I'm a conglomeration of a bunch of things, and Tai Chi adept. I also play guitar, I play piano. And as far as people perceive me, I feel like, at least here, the people that know me mostly think of me as a piano player and don't realize that I've got a compositional background. And actually, that's my strong suit is my hearing composition skills.
Well, cool, man. I guess my last thing to you, since we've lived through this whole COVID thing and we're all coming out of it, what do you hope we realize when we get out of it? Maybe as, live music picks up and just in general, what do you hope is lasting that's going to make us appreciate, not only jazz, but music more?
People really need to know. I mean, we're so, the idea of stopping and smell the roses, I think that the one danger of the tech, and we're always trying to get more hits, more likes on YouTube and wherever. But it's so easy. We have this instant. My classical piano teacher years ago used to say everybody wants instant this, instant that, instant technique, So if they'll listen to the first few notes, move on, because, they have that graph on your YouTube channel that shows you how many people actually, how far they listened, right? And so I would just hope that people would get to where they'd slow down, and it's actually better for them, too, to relax and breathe in, and actually don't be in such a hurry always, take time and listen to something. It's better for your health, physically. It's better for you. And it's better for you mentally and spiritually as well. So I guess that's what it's what comes to mind when you ask that.
Man, hey, this has been wonderful, man. Thank you for opening up about the new recording, about your life in music, and good luck as we move forward.
Thank you too, man. Peace.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest cats in Detroit, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Sven for his time, music, and story. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.